What I am about to tell you sounds like fiction, but every word is true. In 1991, a young woman walked out of a convenience store in Fort Myers, Florida, and vanished into thin air. For 32 years, her family searched. Police investigated. The community mourned. And then, in 2023, someone walked.
Michelle Ann Robertson was 24 years old in the summer of 1991. She had shoulder-length blonde hair that she wore in loose waves, bright blue eyes that seemed to sparkle when she laughed, and a smile that could light up a room. She stood 5'6" tall and had a slim build. Most days you could find her wearing jeans, a simple t-shirt, and her favorite pair of worn sneakers. She was not the type to dress up fancy. Michelle was comfortable in her own skin. She lived in a small apartment on Cleveland Avenue in Fort Myers, Florida. The place was nothing special. A one-bedroom unit on the second floor of a 3-story building painted pale yellow. But Michelle had made it home. She decorated with posters of her favorite bands, Guns N' Roses, Nirvana, Pearl Jam. She loved the grunge rock scene that was exploding in the early 90s. Her friends said she played her music loud and sang even louder, even though she could not carry a tune to save her life. Michelle worked at a local diner called Rosie's Kitchen. It was one of those old-fashioned places with red vinyl booths, a long counter with swivel stools, and a jukebox in the corner. She was a waitress there, had been for 3 years. Her boss, Rosie Martinez, said Michelle was the best employee she ever had. Always on time, never complained. Had a gift for remembering regular customers' orders without writing them down. She made people feel special. That was Michelle's gift. Her typical day started early. She would wake up around 5:30 in the morning, make herself a cup of instant coffee, and head to the diner by 6:15. Her shift ran from 6:30 in the morning until 2:30 in the afternoon. Lunch rush was brutal. The place would fill up with construction workers, office employees on break, and retired folks who came in for the early bird specials. Michelle handled it all with grace. She would work the room, refilling coffee cups, cracking jokes, making sure everyone felt welcome. After work, Michelle had a routine. She would usually stop at the 7-Eleven on Colonial Boulevard. Always the same.
People who knew Michelle described her as genuinely kind. Not fake kind. Not polite because she had to be. Truly kind. She would stop to help a stranger with a flat tire. She would give her last $5 to someone who needed it more. She volunteered at a local animal shelter on Sunday mornings, walking dogs and cleaning cages. She had a soft spot for the older dogs that nobody wanted to adopt. She would spend extra time with them, telling them they were good boys and good girls. Her best friend, Nicole Chen, said Michelle had this laugh that was infectious. When Michelle laughed, everyone around her started laughing too. They had been friends since high school. They had gone through everything together. First boyfriends, first heartbreaks, graduation, moving out of their parents' houses. Nicole said Michelle was the kind of friend who would drop everything if you needed her. 2 in the morning and you needed someone to talk to? Michelle would be there. Car broke down across town, Michelle was on her way. Michelle had quirks that made her memorable. She collected ceramic frogs, had about 30 of them lined up on a shelf in her living room. Nobody knew why frogs, she just liked them. She also had this habit of humming when she was concentrating.
Her coworkers at the diner would hear her humming while she was adding up checks or wiping down tables. She did not even realize she was doing it. She loved thunderstorms. While most people ran in
Fort Myers, Florida, in August of 1991, was hot, brutally hot. The kind of heat that makes the air shimmer above the asphalt. The kind of humidity that makes your clothes stick to your skin the second you step outside. Summer in Southwest Florida was no joke. Temperatures regularly hit the mid-90s. The heat index pushed past 100. Afternoon thunderstorms would roll in around 3 or 4 o'clock, dumping rain for 20 minutes, then leaving everything steaming. The city itself was growing rapidly. Fort Myers was transitioning from a sleepy retirement town to a bustling city. New developments were popping up everywhere: strip malls, gated communities, chain restaurants. But there were still pockets of old Florida, the places that had been there for decades. Local businesses, family-owned shops, neighborhoods where everyone knew everyone. Cleveland Avenue was one of the main roads running through Fort Myers. It stretched for miles, lined with a mix of businesses: auto parts stores, pawn shops, fast food places, small apartment complexes. It was not the nicest part of town, but it was not the worst. It was working class, blue-collar, the kind of area where people minded their own business but would help a neighbor if needed. Michelle's apartment building sat about halfway down Cleveland Avenue. The building had 12 units total. Most of the residents were young people or older folks on fixed incomes. The landlord, a man named Carl Simmons, did the bare minimum in terms of maintenance. The paint was always peeling. The air conditioning worked, but barely. But the rent was cheap, and that was what mattered. The 7-Eleven where Michelle stopped regularly was about 2 miles from her apartment. It sat on the corner of Cleveland Avenue and Colonial Boulevard, a busy intersection. The store was typical of its era: bright fluorescent lights, aisles crammed with chips and candy, a Slurpee machine that was always broken, lottery tickets behind the counter, a magazine rack by the door. The clerk who usually worked the afternoon shift was a guy named Tommy Valdez. He had seen Michelle dozens of times. She was a regular. August of 1991 was a strange time in America. The Gulf War had ended in February. Yellow ribbons still hung on trees supporting the troops coming home. The Soviet Union was collapsing. The world order was shifting. But in Fort Myers, August 7th, 1991, a Wednesday, Michelle Robertson finished her shift at Rosie's Kitchen at 2:30 in the afternoon. Several coworkers saw her leave through the back door, heading to her car. She was wearing her usual jeans, a white tank top, and her worn sneakers. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She seemed in good spirits. She waved goodbye to the cook, Carlos, and told Rosie she would see her tomorrow. Michelle drove her 1987 Honda Civic, light blue, a little beat up but reliable. She left the diner parking lot at approximately 2:35. Security footage from a bank across the street captured her car passing by at 2:37. She was heading east on Colonial Boulevard toward Cleveland Avenue. Traffic was moderate for that time of day. At 2:48, Michelle pulled into the 7-Eleven parking lot. We know this because the working camera inside the store, the one pointed at the register, captured her entering the store at 2:49. The timestamp is clear. Michelle walked in, nodded at Tommy Valdez behind the counter, and headed straight to the refrigerated section at the back. This was her routine. Tommy knew it. He told police later that Michelle was alone. Nobody else was in the store except for one other customer, an older man buying scratch-off lottery tickets. The camera shows Michelle grabbing a Diet Coke from the cooler. She walked to the counter. Tommy grabbed her usual pack of Marlboro Lights without her asking. They exchanged a few words. Tommy said later that Michelle seemed completely normal, happy even. She paid cash, $4.32. She took her change. She grabbed her items. She said thanks and walked toward the door. The camera shows her exiting the store at 2:52, and that is the last confirmed image of Michelle Robertson alive. What happened next is where the mystery begins, because Michelle never made it home. Her car was found in the 7-Eleven parking lot. Keys in the ignition, engine off, driver's door closed but not locked. Her purse was on the passenger seat, wallet still inside with her cash and credit cards. The Diet Coke was on the dashboard, unopened. The pack of cigarettes was on the driver's seat. But Michelle was gone. Nobody saw what happened, or at least nobody came forward to say they saw what happened. The payphone near the store entrance showed no signs of being used. There were no witnesses who reported seeing a struggle.
They got his information. Officer Gonzalez called for backup and for a detective. This was not a typical missing person case. Young, healthy woman. Car found with all her belongings. Last seen just hours ago. No reason to run away. This had all the hallmarks of something bad. Detective Frank Morrison arrived at 7:45. He was a 20-year veteran of the Fort Myers Police Department. Tall, gray hair, weathered face. He had seen a lot in his career, but something about this case bothered him from the start. The scene was too clean, too organized. If someone had grabbed Michelle, there should be some sign, a dropped item, a witness, something. But there was nothing. Morrison interviewed Tommy extensively, walked the timeline, checked the working camera footage, watched Michelle walk out of the store, watched her disappear from frame. He asked about the broken camera outside. Tommy explained it had been broken for weeks. Morrison made a note. That broken camera was going to haunt this investigation. Detective Morrison expanded the search. Officers canvassed the area. They went door to door at nearby businesses, the auto shop next door, a nail salon across the street, a fast food place down the block. Did anyone see anything unusual between 2:50 and 3:30? Did anyone see Michelle? Did anyone see a struggle or a vehicle leaving quickly? The answers were all no. Nobody saw anything. By 9 o'clock that evening, Michelle's family had gathered at the police station. Patricia Robertson was beside herself. She kept saying Michelle's phone records were pulled. Her last call had been to her mother that morning before work. Nothing unusual, no threatening calls, no calls from unknown numbers. Her bank account showed no suspicious activity, no large withdrawals, no unexplained deposits. Her credit cards had not been used since she bought groceries 3 days earlier. The media got wind of the story by Thursday morning, August 8th. Local news stations ran stories, young woman missing from Fort Myers, last seen at 7-Eleven, family desperate for answers. Michelle's photo was plastered on television screens. Patricia made a tearful plea. Please, if anyone knows anything, please come forward. We just want her home. Tips started coming in. The police tip line rang constantly. Someone thought they saw Michelle at a rest stop on Interstate 75. That lead went. Detective Frank Morrison assembled a task force. 6 detectives, 24 uniformed officers, volunteers from the community. This was all hands on deck. The first 72 hours had passed. Michelle was still missing. The urgency was palpable. Morrison set up a command center at the police station. Whiteboards hovered with timelines, maps of the area, photos of Michelle, lists of potential witnesses. The investigation branched in multiple directions simultaneously. First, they needed to understand Michelle's life completely. Was there anyone who wanted to hurt her? Any enemies? Any stalkers? Detectives interviewed everyone who knew her. Co-workers at Rosie's kitchen, regular customers, friends from high school, neighbors at her apartment building. The picture that emerged was consistent. Michelle was well-liked. No known enemies, no one with a grudge. But detectives dug deeper. They looked into Derek's background. Despite his alibi, they needed to be thorough. They found nothing concerning, no history of violence, no previous relationship issues. Friends said he and Michelle were happy together. Were there problems? Sure, every relationship has problems, but nothing that suggested motive for harm. They looked into Michelle's ex-boyfriends. She had dated a guy named Brian Miller in high school. That relationship ended amicably. Brian was now married and living in Georgia. He was cleared. She had a brief relationship with a coworker named Steve Jenkins about 2 years earlier. That ended when Steve moved to North Carolina. He was cleared. There were no other serious relationships. Morrison's team pulled records on every registered sex offender in Lee County. There were 34 at the time. Each one was interviewed. Alibis were checked. 2 did not have solid alibis. The other customer who had been in the store buying lottery tickets was identified as Walter Green, a 72-year-old retiree. He was located and interviewed. He remembered seeing Michelle. She seemed fine. He left before her, walked to his car, and drove home. He saw nothing suspicious. Detectives canvassed a wider area. They went to businesses within a 2-mile radius. Did anyone see a woman matching Michelle's description? Did anyone see a struggle or an argument in a parking lot? Did anyone see someone acting strangely? The answers were frustrating. No, no, no. It was as if Michelle had been taken by a ghost. The lack of physical evidence was maddening. There was no crime scene, not really. Michelle's car was clean, no blood, no fibers that did not belong. Her purse and belongings showed no signs of being rifled through. Nothing was taken. The cigarettes and coke were left behind, suggesting she never made it into her car. But then what happened in the seconds between the store and the vehicle? Morrison developed a theory. Michelle exited the store. She walked to her car. Someone approached her. Maybe someone she knew. Maybe someone who seemed non-threatening. They engaged her in conversation. Then, quickly, they forced her into a vehicle. It would have taken seconds. In daylight, at a busy intersection. It seemed impossible. But it was the only theory that fit. The media attention intensified. Michelle's case was featured on local news every night. Flyers were posted all over Fort Myers. Have you seen this woman? Call the Fort Myers Police Department. The tip line continued to ring, but nothing substantial came through. Patricia Robertson became the public face of the family's anguish. She gave interviews. She begged for information. She said she believed Michelle was still alive. She had to believe that. The alternative was unbearable. Patricia organized search parties every weekend. Dozens of volunteers would meet at the police station and a psychic contacted the police. She said she had visions of Michelle. She described a wooded area near water. She said Michelle was there. Morrison was skeptical, but he was desperate. He sent a team to search areas matching the description. They found nothing. The psychic was thanked and dismissed. Weeks turned into months. The task force was reduced. Other cases demanded attention. The daily briefings became weekly. Morrison continued to work the case, but leads were drying up. The file grew thicker with dead ends. In October, 2 months after Michelle disappeared, hunters found human remains in a wooded area near Alva, about 20 miles from Fort Myers. Morrison's heart sank. He feared the worst. The remains were sent to the medical examiner. It was not Michelle. The remains belonged to a man who had been missing for over a year. Morrison felt relief and frustration in equal measure. Nicole Chen, Michelle's best friend, organized a candlelight vigil in November. Hundreds of people attended. They gathered at the 7-Eleven parking lot. They lit candles. They prayed. Patricia spoke. She thanked everyone for not forgetting her daughter. She said Michelle was loved. She said they would never stop looking. Derek stood beside her, tears streaming down his face. By December, the case was growing cold. Morrison refused to let it die. He reviewed the file constantly, looking for something he had missed, some detail that did not add up, some witness they had not talked to. But there was nothing. The investigation had been thorough. They had followed every lead, checked every tip, searched everywhere they could think of. Michelle Robertson had simply vanished. Morrison interviewed Tommy Valdez one more time in early December. He asked if Tommy had remembered anything else, any detail, no matter how small. Tommy thought hard. He said there was one thing, maybe nothing, but that afternoon, after Michelle left, a man had come into the store. Maybe 10 or 15
Years passed. The world changed. Technology advanced. Fort Myers continued to grow, but Michelle Robertson's case sat in a box in the cold case archives. The file was thick. Hundreds of pages of interviews, reports, evidence logs, but no answers. Patricia Robertson never stopped fighting. She became an advocate for missing persons. She connected with other families dealing with similar tragedies. She attended vigils. She spoke at events. She kept Michelle's name alive. Every year on August 7th, she would return to the 7-Eleven. She would stand in the parking lot where her daughter's car had been found. She would place flowers. She would cry. And she would promise Michelle that she had not given up. Derek Patterson eventually moved away. The pain was too much. He left Fort Myers in 1994 and moved to North Carolina. He started over, met someone new, got married, had kids, but he never forgot Michelle. He told his wife about her, about what happened, about the guilt he carried for not protecting her somehow, even though logically he knew there was nothing he could have done. On Michelle's birthday every year, Derek would light a candle, a small, private memorial. Nicole Chen stayed in Fort Myers. She thought about Michelle constantly. Every time she drove past the 7-Eleven, her stomach would twist. She avoided that intersection for years.
When she finally forced herself to drive by, she would glance at the parking lot and feel a wave of sadness. Nicole got married in 1996. She invited
DNA technology had advanced significantly since 1991. Sarah had the unidentified hairs found in Michelle's car retested. A profile was created. She entered it into CODIS, the National DNA Database. No match. She checked if any similar abductions had occurred in Florida around the same time. There were a few, but none that seemed connected. Different methods, different victim profiles. Sarah hit the same walls Morrison had hit years earlier. In 2010, Patricia Robertson was diagnosed with breast cancer. She fought it with the same determination she had fought to find her daughter. She underwent surgery, chemotherapy, radiation. She survived, but she told her son, Jason, that she did not want to die without knowing what happened to Michelle. Jason promised her they would keep searching. He meant it. Amanda, Michelle's younger sister, became a social worker. She specialized in helping trauma survivors. She said Michelle's disappearance shaped her entire life. She wanted to help people who were hurting. It was her way of honoring.
In 2012, a 20th anniversary story would appear. Patricia would give an interview. She was older now. Her hair was gray. Her face was lined with grief and time, but her voice was still strong. "Someone knows something," she would say. "Please come forward. It is not too late." In 2016, a true crime podcast called Forgotten Voices featured Michelle's case. The host, a woman named Rebecca Martinez, did a 3-part series. She interviewed Patricia. She spoke with Nicole. She talked to retired Detective Morrison, who was 71 by then. Morrison's voice was shaky, but his memory was sharp. He walked through the investigation. He admitted his frustrations. He said he thought about Michelle often. The podcast got thousands of downloads. Tips came into the Fort Myers Police Department. Detectives followed up on each one. None led anywhere. But it kept the case alive. Technology continued to evolve. Social media changed how information spread. Patricia created a Facebook page called Justice for Michelle Robertson. She posted photos of Michelle. She shared updates. She connected with other families of missing persons. The page grew to several thousand followers. People who never knew Michelle felt connected to her story. They shared posts. They commented with support and prayers. Patricia found comfort in the community. In 2018, genetic genealogy was becoming a breakthrough tool in cold cases. This was the technique that had led to the arrest of the Golden State Killer. Detective Sarah Chen, still working cold cases, wondered if it could help with Michelle's case. The problem was they had DNA from unidentified hairs, but they did not know if those hairs belonged to the perpetrator or were just random contamination. Still, she submitted the DNA profile to a genealogy database. She waited. Months passed. No hits. By 2020, 30 years had passed since Michelle's disappearance. 30 years.
The detectives sent the DNA evidence to a private lab that specialized in genetic genealogy. The lab built a family tree using the DNA profile. It was painstaking work. Months of tracing lineages, checking birth records, marriage records, death certificates. But slowly, a picture emerged. The DNA belonged to someone with roots in the Fort Myers area. Someone whose ancestors had lived in Lee County for generations.
By early 2022, the lab had narrowed it down to 3 possible family lines. Santos and Mitchell began investigating living descendants of those lines. They looked for men who would have been the right age in 1991, who lived in or around Fort Myers, who had the opportunity. The list was daunting, dozens of names, but it was the first real progress in decades. Patricia Robertson was told about the developments. She was cautiously hopeful. She had been disappointed.
His name was Carl Brennan. He was 64 years old. He lived in Bonita Springs, Florida, just south of Fort Myers. He had lived there his entire life, and according to the genetic genealogy results, his DNA was a very close match to the unidentified hairs found in Michelle Robertson's car. Detectives Santos and Mitchell pulled everything they could find on Carl Brennan. He had a criminal record, but nothing violent. A DUI in 1988, a petty theft charge in 1993, a domestic disturbance call in 2001, but no charges filed. He had worked various jobs over the years. Construction, mostly. Handyman work. Nothing steady. He had been married twice, divorced twice. He had 3 children from his first marriage. They were all adults now, living out of state. Santos dug into Brennan's life in 1991. Where was he working? Where was he living? The records were scattered, but she pieced it together. In August of 1991, Carl Brennan was 33 years old. He was living in a rental house on the south side of Fort Myers, about 3 miles from the 7-Eleven on Colonial Boulevard. He was working for a small construction company called Apex Builders. The company had gone out of business in 1995, but Santos tracked down the former owner, a man named Robert Chen. Yes, another Chen, no relation to the detective or to Nicole. Robert Chen was 79 years old and living in a retirement community in Naples. Santos and Mitchell drove down to interview him. They asked about Carl Brennan. Robert remembered him, said Carl was a decent worker but had a temper, got into arguments with other crew members. Robert had fired him in late 1991 or 92. He could not remember exactly when or why, just that it had not worked out. The detectives asked if Robert remembered where Brennan had been working in August of 1991. Robert said he would have to check his old records, if he even still had them. He went into his storage unit and found boxes of paperwork from Apex Builders. He and the detectives spent hours going through yellowed invoices and job logs. Finally, they found it. In early August of 1991, Carl Brennan had been working on a renovation project at a small office building on Cleveland Avenue, less than a mile from the 7-Eleven where Michelle was last seen. Santos felt her pulse quicken. This put Brennan in the immediate area at the right time. They needed more. They needed to place him at the 7-Eleven specifically. They needed to connect him to Michelle directly. Mitchell pulled phone records from August of 1991. This was difficult. Most phone companies did not keep records that old. But he got lucky. A warehouse in Tennessee still had archived records from regional carriers. After
They sat in his living room. Santos started casual, asked about his work history, his family. Brennan answered, seemingly relaxed. Then Santos asked if he remembered working in Fort Myers in 1991. Brennan said yeah, he worked construction all over the area back then. Santos asked if he ever shopped at the 7-Eleven on Colonial Boulevard. Brennan paused. Then he said maybe, he could not remember. It was a long time ago. Mitchell asked if Brennan had ever met a woman named Michelle Robertson. Brennan's face did not change. He said the name did not ring a bell. Mitchell showed him a photo of Michelle. Brennan looked at it, shook his head. "Never seen her," he said. Santos watched his body language. Brennan was tense now, his leg bouncing, his hands fidgeting. Santos decided to push. She said they had evidence that placed Brennan in the area when Michelle disappeared. She said they had DNA evidence. Brennan stared at her. His jaw tightened. Then he said, "I think I should talk to a lawyer." The interview was over. The detectives left. They regrouped at the station. Brennan had not confessed, had not said anything incriminating. But his reaction told them something. He was scared. He knew why they were there. They decided to apply pressure. They obtained a warrant for Brennan's DNA, a cheek swab to compare to the hair found in Michelle's car. The warrant was...
Brennan's children were contacted. 2 of them refused to talk to police. The third, a daughter named Emily Brennan, agreed to a phone interview. She was 38 and lived in Atlanta. She said she had not spoken to her father in 10 years. She said he was not a good dad. He was absent even when he was present. She asked what this was about. Santos told her they were investigating a cold case. Emily said if her father did something terrible, she would not be shocked. The DNA results came back on November 3, 2022. Santos opened the email from the lab. Her hands were shaking. She read the report. Then she read it again. The DNA from Carl Brennan was a match to the hair found in Michelle Robertson's car. Not just a close match, a definitive match. Brennan had been in Michelle's car. There was no other explanation. Santos called Mitchell. They called their supervisor. They called the district attorney. A meeting was held. The evidence was reviewed. They had DNA placing Brennan in the victim's car. They had a witness who possibly identified him at the scene. They had him working in the area at the time. They had suspicious behavior reported by his ex-wife. It was circumstantial, but it was strong. The DA agreed. They had enough for an arrest warrant. On November 10, 2022, Carl Brennan was arrested at his home. He was charged with kidnapping and first-degree murder in the death of Michelle Robertson. Even though her body had never been found, the DA felt confident they could prosecute. Brennan did not resist arrest. He did not say a word. He was read his rights. He was taken to the Lee County.
Carl Brennan sat in jail for 3 months. He was kept in protective custody because cases involving violence against women made inmates targets. He spent 23 hours a day in his cell. He had limited contact with other prisoners. His lawyer, Marcus Webb, visited regularly. They were preparing for trial. Webb told Brennan the evidence was serious but not insurmountable. They could argue contamination. They could argue the DNA got in Michelle's car innocently. They could create reasonable doubt. Brennan seemed resigned. He barely spoke during these meetings. He just nodded. But something was eating at Carl Brennan. 3 months in a cell. 3 months alone with his thoughts. 3 months replaying that day in August of 1991. 3 months thinking about Michelle Robertson, about her family, about what he had done. On February 14, 2023, Valentine's Day, Carl Brennan told his lawyer he wanted to talk to the detectives. Webb was surprised. He advised against it strongly. "You do not have to say anything," Webb told him. "We can fight this." Brennan shook his head. "I need to talk," he said. "I cannot live with this anymore." Webb contacted Detective Santos. Santos could not believe it. Suspects did not just volunteer to talk, especially not with strong evidence against them. She and Mitchell went to the jail that afternoon. They brought a video camera. They read Brennan his Miranda rights again. He waived them. He said he understood. He wanted to talk. The interview room was small. Cinder block walls, a metal table, 3 plastic chairs. Brennan sat on one side. Santos and Mitchell sat across from him. The camera was rolling. Santos started. She said, "Carl, you asked to speak with us." Brennan nodded. He looked older than his 64 years. His eyes were red. He had not been sleeping. He said, "I need to tell you what happened. I need to get this out." Mitchell said, "Okay, we are listening." And then Carl Brennan confessed. The confession no one saw coming. Brennan started by saying he never meant to hurt anyone. Santos and Mitchell exchanged glances but said nothing. Brennan continued. He said in August of 1991, he was in a bad place. His marriage was falling apart. He was drinking heavily. He was angry all the time. He knew it was not an excuse, but that was his state of mind. On August 7th, he had been working on the renovation job on Cleveland Avenue. It was hot, miserable. His crew knocked off around 2:30. Brennan decided to stop at the 7-Eleven to get cigarettes and a cold drink. He pulled into the parking lot around 2:45. He went inside. There were a couple of people in the store. He grabbed a Coke. He got cigarettes. He paid. He walked out. As he was walking to his truck, he saw a woman walking out of the store. She was blonde, pretty. She was carrying a drink and cigarettes. She walked to a blue Honda Civic. Brennan watched her. He did not know why, he just did. She got to her car. She was fumbling with her keys and the items in her hands. She dropped her keys. They fell on the ground near the driver's door. Brennan said something came over him. He did not plan it. He walked over to her. He said,
He drove for about 20 minutes. He turned off onto a dirt road. It was a construction site, a new development that had not been finished yet. There were half-built houses, piles of lumber, equipment, but no workers. It was after 3 in the afternoon. Everyone had gone home. The site was deserted. Brennan stopped the truck. He turned off the engine. Michelle looked at him. She said, "Please, I will not tell anyone. Just let me go. I have a family. I have a mom. Please." Brennan said he looked at her and felt something break inside him. He said he realized what he had done. He had ruined this woman's life, and his own, and there was no taking it back. He told Michelle to get out of the truck. She hesitated. He said, "Get out." She opened the door. She stepped out onto the dirt. She started to run. Brennan got out. He chased her. He caught her within seconds. She was not fast enough. He grabbed her. She was screaming. He panicked. He said he did not know what to do. He could not let her go. She would go to the police. He would go to jail. His life would be over. Brennan's voice broke as he said this next part. He said, "I put my hands around her neck. I just wanted her to stop screaming. I just wanted her to be quiet so I could think. But I squeezed too hard. She stopped fighting. She went limp. I let go. She fell to the ground. I checked for a pulse. There was nothing. She was dead. I killed her." The interview room was silent. Santos felt sick. Mitchell stared at Brennan. Brennan was crying now, tears streaming down his face. He said, "I panicked. I did not know what to do. I looked around. There was a concrete foundation that had been poured for one of the houses. It was not finished.
There was a section that had not set yet, still wet. I dragged her body over. I pushed her into the concrete. She sank down. I covered her with more concrete from the mixer that was there. I buried her.
The confession lasted 2 hours. Brennan gave every detail: where he grabbed her, how he killed her, where he buried her. Santos and Mitchell took notes. They asked clarifying questions. When it was done, Brennan looked exhausted. He said, "Can I ask you something?" Santos said yes. Brennan said, "How did you find me?" Santos told him about the DNA, about the genetic genealogy. Brennan nodded. He said, "I always knew it would catch up to me. I just did not know when." Brennan was taken back to his cell. Santos and Mitchell walked out of the jail into the sunlight. They stood there for a moment. Neither spoke. Finally, Santos said, "We need to find her." Mitchell nodded. They drove to the district attorney's office. They presented the confession. The DA authorized an immediate search. The next day, February 15th, 2023, a team of investigators, forensic specialists, and heavy equipment operators descended on Pine Ridge Estates. The house Brennan described was located. It was a 3-bedroom ranch-style home. A family of 4 lived there: the husband, wife, and 2 teenage kids. They were shocked when police knocked on their door and explained the situation. The recovery of Michelle Robertson's remains took 3 days. Forensic anthropologists worked carefully to remove every bone, every fragment. The remains were transported to the medical examiner's office. Dr. Helen Park, the chief medical examiner, confirmed the identity through dental records. It was Michelle. The hyoid bone in her neck showed fractures consistent with strangulation. The cause of death was confirmed. Carl Brennan had told the truth. Brennan was formally charged with first-degree murder. The kidnapping charge remained. His confession, along with the physical evidence, made this a solid case. The district attorney, Richard Flores, announced they would seek life in prison without parole. Florida had the death penalty, but Flores felt life without parole was appropriate given Brennan's confession and cooperation in locating the body. Carl Brennan's lawyer, Marcus Webb, advised him to plead guilty. There was no defense. Brennan had confessed. The body had been found exactly where he said. A trial would be a formality. Brennan agreed. On March 20th, 2023, he appeared in court and entered a guilty plea to first-degree murder and kidnapping. The courtroom was packed. Patricia Robertson was there. Jason was there. Amanda was there. Nicole Chen was there. Derek Patterson flew in from North Carolina. Retired Detective Frank Morrison, now 78 years old and using a walker, was there. They all wanted to see justice finally served. The judge, Honorable Margaret Stevens, accepted the guilty plea. She set a sentencing hearing for April 10th. That hearing would allow the family to give victim impact statements. To tell the court. Jason Robertson spoke next. He said Michelle was his little sister. He was supposed to protect her. He felt like he failed. He said he thought about her every day for 32 years. He said he hoped Brennan suffered in prison the way the family had suffered. Amanda Robertson could barely speak through tears. She said Michelle was her hero, her best friend. She said she became a social worker because of what happened. She wanted to help people hurt by violence. She said Michelle's legacy was that she made Amanda want to help others. And that was beautiful in the midst of something so ugly. Nicole Chen said losing Michelle was like losing a part of herself. She said she replayed their last conversation 1,000 times. She wished she had told Michelle she loved her one more time. She said Michelle deserved better, deserved a full life, and Brennan stole that. Derek Patterson said he loved Michelle. He said he never fully moved on. Part of him was always back in 1991, always wondering, always hoping. He said finally having answers was both a relief and a new kind of pain, because now it was real. Now it was final. After the hearing, the judge asked Brennan if he wanted to say anything. Brennan stood. He turned to face the family. He said, "I am sorry. I know that means nothing. I know sorry does not bring her back. I killed an innocent woman. I destroyed your family. I have lived with the guilt every day. I deserve whatever punishment I get. I just want you to know I am truly sorry." Patricia stared at him. She did not respond. She turned away. Judge Stevens addressed the court. She said Michelle Robertson was a vibrant young woman with her whole life ahead of her.
The house in Pine Ridge Estates was eventually sold. The new owners knew the history. They had the foundation blessed. They planted a tree in the yard in Michelle's.
The case of Michelle Robertson is closed, but her story lives on. It is a reminder that cold cases are never truly cold as long as someone remembers, as long as someone fights, as long as technology advances and investigators refuse to give up. Patricia Robertson is 73 years old now. She still lives in Fort Myers. She visits Michelle's grave every week. She brings flowers. She talks to her daughter. She tells her about the family, about life, about how much she is missed. Patricia has found peace in knowing the truth. It does not erase the pain, but it brings closure. Jason and Amanda have families of their own. They tell their children about Aunt Michelle. They show them photos. They keep her memory alive. They teach their kids to be kind, to help others, to live fully, because life is precious and it can be taken in an instant. Derek Patterson never remarried after his wife passed away in 2021. He says part of his heart will always belong to Michelle. He keeps a photo of her on his mantle. His grandchildren ask who she is. He tells them. He says she was someone very special, someone he loved, someone who was taken too soon. Nicole Chen still lives in Fort Myers. She and Patricia have stayed close. They meet for coffee once a month. They talk about Michelle. They laugh about old memories. They cry sometimes. But mostly, they celebrate the time they had with her.
Carl Brennan is serving his sentence. He will die in prison. He has not given any interviews. He has not written any letters. He keeps to himself. Fellow inmates say he is quiet, withdrawn. He spends his days in his cell, reading, thinking, living with what he did. The 7-Eleven where Michelle was last seen is gone. It is a pharmacy now. But locals remember. They remember the young woman who vanished. They remember the 32 years of searching. They remember the community coming together. Fort Myers has changed. It is bigger, more developed. But the memory of Michelle Robertson remains. There is a small memorial plaque near the pharmacy. It says, "In memory of Michelle Ann Robertson, 1967 to 1991. Never forgotten." The case taught us many things. It taught us that evil can happen anywhere.
Girlfriend. She was a waitress who remembered customers' orders. She was a woman who collected ceramic frogs and loved thunderstorms. She was someone who laughed loudly and hummed when she concentrated. She was kind. She was real. She mattered. Her life was cut short by a moment of violence, a stranger's decision, a terrible choice that rippled through decades. But her memory endures, in the people who loved her, in the investigators who never stopped searching, in the community that refused to forget. Patricia Robertson says she feels Michelle's presence sometimes. When the wind blows, when thunder rolls across the Florida sky, when she sees a ceramic frog in a store window. She says Michelle is at peace now, no longer lost, no longer waiting to be found. She is home. The confession that no one saw coming brought an end to 32 years of mystery. Carl Brennan could have stayed silent, could have forced a trial, could have made the family suffer through testimony and evidence and uncertainty. But something inside him broke. The weight of guilt became too heavy. The burden of knowing what he had done became unbearable. And so he confessed. He told the truth. He led them to Michelle. It does not make him a good person. It does not excuse what he did. Taking a life can never be justified or forgiven in that way. But it gave the family what they desperately needed: answers, closure, the ability to lay Michelle to rest with dignity. And for that, there is a complicated gratitude, not for him, but for the outcome. Justice came late for Michelle Robertson, 32 years late, but it came. The system worked, eventually. Technology advanced. Investigators persevered.
Thank you for listening to this story. Thank you for bearing witness to Michelle's life and death. Thank you for caring about a woman you never met, but who deserved so much better than what she got. Rest in peace, Michelle. You are finally home.